I am proud to introduce a leader who is working hard to make our world a more inclusive place for all of us, our children and our children's children. So please join me in welcoming the next leader of Canada's NDP, Jagmeet Singh.
Thank you so much. Can we give a round of applause for for Jane and Shelley, please? For their wonderful introduction. I also want to acknowledge we have at least one, if there's others, please raise your hand. There's at least one MLA that's in the house right now. We've got Lisa Roberts right here, everybody.
Susan LeBlanc.
Oh, Susan LeBlanc. Oh, here you are. Susan LeBlanc. Yeah, I'm particularly happy because I was able to work in both their campaigns a little bit, but during the election, so it's so exciting to see you both here. Awesome. We also have a number of former candidates that ran for us. It's a tough job to do, so I know that Shelley's one of them.
Yes.
Shelley's one of them, and there's a couple others that are here. We have Rana, and if they could just come up here, let's give them some love too. Come on up. Give them some love! And I also want to ask, is Michelle here?
Yeah. I'm way back here.
Wait, Michelle, come up here for a second.
Okay, I'm here.
Abad, can you come here with me?
It's not my baby, it's my nephew.
Abad, come here too for a second. So,
We both have babies.
That's awesome. So, the reason why I want to bring up Abad and Michelle is that anything that anyone does, and I know Lisa and Susan will tell you this as well, anything that a leader does, it's not possible by themselves. It's only possible with an incredible team. And I have an incredible team. We have so many amazing people, and two of the people that have been really crucial in helping to organize today, Abad and Michelle, so can we please give them a lot of love for their work. And I just want to say in general that there's so many people behind everything that we do, even today's event. There's many more volunteers, so thank you to all the volunteers, thank you to all the organizers. You're all making such an amazing thing happen, so thank you to all of you. Also, this is Michelle's spot, by the way, if you didn't know. We have a strong entrepreneurial, I know this already. So, I'm the outsider telling you guys who owns it. But let's give a lot of love to Alcred Ego. What a beautiful space. Pretty good turnout, actually. Pretty happy with this turnout. Not so bad. So definitely we'll move to that. So what I want to do is give you a little bit of an idea. Sorry to the folks behind me. If you want to come in front of me, just come on out. Yeah, come from the front. Yeah. So I can look at your beautiful faces.
Chance to ask you some questions.
Yeah, for sure. Anyone want to come on this window? Okay. So what I hope to do is a couple of things. One is I want to tell you a little bit about why I'm running and some of the policies that I care about, kind of briefly, just give you a bit of a flavor. And then tell you about some of the work that I've done, just to give you a sense of why I care, and to give you a little bit of a background of what motivates me, and then I'll leave it to your questions. Yeah? Is that cool? All right, awesome. So when I first launched the campaign in May, I launched with 4 pillars. And the pillars, I call them pillars because each one is incredibly important. They hold up the structure of our campaign. So the 4 pillars I talked about, the first pillar is inequality. I hope that this campaign and moving forward, we talk about inequality and how we can tackle it. And inequality has a whole bunch of forms. We know there's income inequality that's growing, and it's not something that's just happening by coincidence. When you have laws like bankruptcy laws that allow a company that goes bankrupt to give priority to stakeholders and creditors, but neglect entirely workers, their salaries, their pensions, their benefits, that's clearly legislation that's continuing inequality, that's growing inequality. So these are decisions that past governments have made that have allowed inequality to exist and to grow. So we need to tackle income inequality. But we also know that there's serious crises going on, particularly housing crisis. And I thought initially when I started the campaign that this was just an issue for Toronto or maybe Vancouver. Not maybe, but definitely. No, right? This is an issue I'm hearing across Canada. Here in Atlantic Canada, I was in St. John's, Newfoundland, Labrador. People there, young people were coming up to me telling me that they couldn't imagine owning a home. People are telling me here in Halifax that the idea of home ownership, even renting is becoming difficult. People can't even afford to rent a place. This is the reality. So we have a major housing crisis. That's a part of that inequality. The other pillar I talked about was reconciliation. And on reconciliation, we had a previous campaign with the government and a leader that talked about reconciliation being the hallmark of their campaign and going to be a guiding principle in their governing. That same party and that same leader currently have 4 human rights compliance orders that they're contravening. The Canadian Human Rights Tribunal says very clearly that Indigenous children should get equitable funding. Prime Minister Trudeau says, no they don't. I'm going to appeal that decision. Not once, not twice, 4 times. That's shameful. It sends a message that Indigenous people's lives are less worthy. It says that they don't deserve to get equal funding. I think if we're serious about reconciliation, at a minimum, they need to get equitable funding, and probably a lot more than just that. A starting point to be serious about reconciliation means that reconciliation equals equitable funding, sending a message that Indigenous peoples, their lives matter, that their circumstances matter, and that we're going to do something about it, as a fundamental starting point. So those are the 2 issues, and the third one I talked about as a pillar, and I think it's fundamentally important, is electoral reform. Now again, we had a leader that talked about this will be the last election with the current model. This will be the last election with the first past the post system. And then when it became inconvenient, in fact, actually the real reason came out, the evidence came out that it turns out people wanted proportional representation, and he said, I didn't think that was a good system. Translation, it wasn't going to benefit his party, so then he abandoned the promise. I think electoral reform is so fundamentally important. It doesn't sound like the sexiest issue, but if you actually break it down, it will ensure that we never see any fears of vote splitting again. There won't be any fears of strategic voting ever again. If we had people know that their voice would be reflected in Parliament, that if you get 30% of the vote, you get 30% of the seats, that's a just system that makes sure that people's voices are reflected in Ottawa. That's just, that's fair, and that's what we need to do. So I'm not just saying that we're going to change the system, I'm also proposing a plan, which is, I like Guy Caron's plan, it's a great plan, the idea that we need proportional representation, it should be mixed membered, and it should be regional lists, meaning that if you're in a particular community, you should know that you have a representative that understands your issues in your community. So that's a system that makes sense, it'll give people a voice, and I think it's fundamentally important. I also talked about the importance of tackling climate change. And we all know that this is something fundamental, not just for future generations. Sometimes we talk about climate change, we think about the future. I'm talking about right now, today. We're faced with increasing extreme weather conditions, which aren't a coincidence. These are a result of traumatic climate change that's a result of human activity. And we need to do our part, not just in Canada, but internationally as leaders in this movement. We need to set standards, so I put forward a strong plan on how we can tackle climate change. So those are the 4 principles I care about, and I'm open to some questions on those topics if you want. But let me get into, I got some more stuff first. We'll get to your questions. I got a couple more things. Come on, I was a lawyer and then I'm a politician. I'm going to talk a little bit longer than that. A little bit more, right? You expect it.
When you answer questions.
You expect a story, right? I give you some stories. So let me tell you a couple more stories. So just to give you a sense of, I'll put this out there. The other candidates are wonderful people. We have extremely qualified, passionate, and progressive candidates. Let's give them a round of applause. I would say very clearly, if you look at our policies and you hear the debates, we agree on most issues. We're in agreement on most progressive values. There might be some nuances, but we pretty much are in the same position. So I'll tell you about my positions on things, but more than that, I want to hear, eventually we're going to hear from the membership, hear your concerns and your issues, and work together to come up with policies. That's really what's going to happen. So what I can tell you is, I can tell you about the issues that I fought on my own to give you a sense of how I fight on issues and what type of personality I bring to the fight. That'll give you a sense of what type of leader you're choosing. I think that'll give you more insight. But I'm happy to talk policy as well. So the couple of issues that I fought on, the first issue I want to tell you about is auto insurance. Again, auto insurance, on the surface of it, not the sexiest issue either, right? But in my riding, auto insurance was the highest in the entire province. It actually is the fact that in Ontario we pay the highest auto insurance rates in the country. So I started looking at it and what was going on. What had happened is this massive industry, the insurance industry, had lobbied the government for years, for basically a decade, and had systematically reduced the coverage that we receive in Ontario. So our coverage was going down, but the premiums were allowed to increase. So it's like you're going to a movie theater, you get to watch half the movie, the ticket costs twice as much. And the government's allowing this to happen. They're allowing people to be exploited. Our coverage was being reduced, our protection was being reduced, but the government was allowing insurance companies to raise premiums. On top of that, what came out is, what we uncovered by researching, was that low and middle income neighborhoods were being charged twice and sometimes triple as much as higher income communities. And this is something that's prohibited under the law, but this is something that's going on. And you would think, okay, maybe it's happening because in the lower income, some people had the assumption that maybe in the lower income or middle income communities there was more rates of theft. There wasn't. Some people thought, oh, maybe there's more likelihood or higher rate of accidents. There was no evidence to suggest that. What was happening is low and middle income people often are working in jobs where they actually have to be physically involved in their work. And that meant if they were injured, they would have to take time off. So basically, higher income folks work in a condition where they don't need to take time off as much. They're less likely to take time off because their injuries might allow them to be accommodated by working at sitting down at the computer as opposed to standing up, or instead of giving a speech, they could sit down at the corporate table. So what was happening is low income people were being punished for being low income. This is shameful, unacceptable, and so we put this issue forward. No one else was willing to take it on. The insurance lobby was very powerful. No one's willing to call them out. We called them out and said that the insurance industry is being allowed to exploit the people because the government's allowing this to happen. We called them out. We pushed for a reduction in premiums, which meant a loss of about $1 billion to the industry. We passed forward that motion. The government put it into their budget, and we were able to get some justice for people. So that was an issue. To give you a sense that as a team, we were willing to take on this massive industry because we believe in fighting for people's rights and standing up to injustice. There was another big issue, temporary job agencies, and I don't know if that's a big issue here in Nova Scotia. I'm not hearing too much about it, but temporary job agencies are massive on the federal level and they're massive in Ontario. To give you a quick idea, these agencies started off at about a decade ago at about $200 to $300 million revenue a year. Now, they're at about $3 billion revenue a year, billion with a B. Wow. So these agencies, what they do is, if you're young, if you're racialized, and often for women, this is the only way to get a job in Ontario. You have to go through an agency. And a lot of companies are using these agencies as well. What happens is, the agency acts as kind of like the HR for the company. And so you work through an agency that claws back as much as 40% of your salary. Yeah. They're allowed to claw back 40% of your salary while you're working through this agency. This is a fact that goes on. People in my constituency are impacted by this. On top of that, if the company wants to hire you directly, they have to pay a penalty fee to the agency to hire you directly. Yeah. That's a direct barrier to getting directly employed, to getting permanently employed. That's allowed to happen. So we took this issue on, we brought forward legislation in the House and passed that as well, and now the government's working on, we put pressure on the government to work on getting this changed because we believe in people deserve equal pay, equal benefits for comparable or equal work. We believe that not a cent of their salary should be clawed back. People deserve justice, and that's what we fought for. And I'm going to tell you this is the last issue. I'm going to wrap it up here, but I'm going to tell you a quick story before I tell you about this third issue. So let's get to tell some stories, right? Stories are good.
They're good stories.
I'm going to give you a good story. This is going to be okay. The story will be all right. I can't oversell.
You're already good.
So, a little bit about why I care. People kind of want to know, why does someone care? When I was a young kid growing up, I grew up in a smaller town in Ontario. And in that town, as a brown-skinned boy with long hair and a funny-sounding name, on my name, by the way, I want you all to become ambassadors for me. It's a bit confusing. It's spelled with an A, but it's pronounced like it's a U. So it's not Jag, it's Jug like hug. So Jug and meet like we meet each other. Jagmeet. Yeah, that's it. And when you say it, I hear friend to the world. That's what it means in my language. So Jagmeet is friend to the world. Kind of cute. Anyways, now it's cute, but when I was a kid, it was not so cute. Not so cute. So anyway, so a funny sounding first name, long hair, brown skin. So I go to school, kids would make fun of me. Kids were pretty tough where I grew up. So they kind of punch me. They say my skin was dirty, that I didn't take showers because my skin is brown. Some people might have experienced that as well. I'm like, no, that's my skin. I've showered, I promise. They're like, no, you're dirty. So it's tough as a kid. But moving on from that, what I realized was, facing that kind of unfairness, being treated unfairly because of the color of my skin or because of my name or my long hair, it resulted in me being more sensitive to unfairness around me. So I became more sensitive to it when I noticed it in the lives of others, and I realized I wasn't alone. That unfairness was happening all around me. So subtle things. Before I developed my feminist theory, my sister started going to a new school, and she liked wearing pants. And the new school had a uniform where she had to wear a skirt, and she's like, I don't want to wear a skirt. And I'm like, you know what? She shouldn't have to if she doesn't want to. Why should she have to change her clothing based on this arbitrary distinction? It seemed to be unfair. It's a subtle thing. I hadn't fully developed my theory on this, but it seemed to me as unfair. As I got older, though, one of the things that struck me as incredibly unfair was when I was going to university. And for me, my dad had struggled a lot, my mom had struggled, but they both went to university, so I assumed that I was going to go as well. And so some of my friends, I asked them what their plans were. After high school, what were they going to do? And one of my friends was really good at art, and I thought he was going to pursue that, and I thought, what are you going to do with that? He's like, I'm going to try to find a job. I'm like, what about your art, though? He's like, I can't afford to pursue that. I got to find a job and start earning a living. And, other friends who were passionate about computers, passionate about all sorts of things, but none of them thought, like a lot of the friends I was around, none of them thought that they could even dream about going to university. And that struck me as incredibly unfair. That people with passion and this desire to do more couldn't even dream of a future because they had these barriers. Tuition fees were too high, cost of living was too much, it wasn't even a reality for them. And that struck me as unfair. And so I started feeling this notion that this unfairness, something has to be done about it. And my mom taught me something. My mom always said to me that we're all one. I'm like, what do you mean we're all one? We look so different and we come from different places. What do you mean? She's like, no, we're all one. That we can celebrate our differences, celebrate our uniqueness, but we're all connected, we're all one. And I had a hard time understanding that when I was a kid. I didn't get what she was saying. But over the years, she kept on teaching me this principle, this idea, and it's really become a core part of what I believe in. We're all connected. Our differences are beautiful, but we're all in this struggle together. We're all in the same fight together. We all deserve justice together. If someone else is suffering, and this is something my mom always taught me, that I should feel like I'm suffering as well. If we do well, someone does well, we rise together. And that's a big part of what I believe in. And so combining this sensitivity and justice with this belief that we're connected is why I care and why I've been fighting issues. So I'll tell you one last story, and the issue that I fought on will come up. You probably know what the issue is, because I left out the one big issue. So when I was a kid, growing up in this small town, my dad had a nice car. He worked hard, did some good stuff, and was able to buy a nice car. So I drive it around sometimes in the city. And every other week, literally like clockwork, at least once every other week, I would get pulled over by the police. And they'd pull me over, ask for my driver's license, ask for my registration and my insurance, check everything, and then let me go on my way and say this was just routine procedure. And then I went to my friends, I'm like, hey, do you guys get stopped a lot? I get stopped like a couple times a month. I just keep on getting stopped by the police. Like, are you getting tickets? Are you speeding? I'm like, no, I don't get a ticket. They just say it's routine procedure. They're like, okay, Jagmeet, it's not routine. I'm like, really? They're like, I don't know if you notice yourself. You kind of stand out a bit in our city. I'm like, no, that's why I'm getting stopped? I was a bit naive, I guess. And they're like, no, that's why you're getting stopped, man, because we're not getting stopped. I'm like, all right. Anyway, so that was me as a kid. I was getting stopped, and it was, I didn't really get it totally. I thought it was unfair, but I didn't really understand it. Fast forward. So I've graduated from university with a degree in science and biology, and I got into a really good law school, Osgoode Hall Law School. And in my second year and I'm about to become a lawyer. So I'm hanging out in Toronto. I was born in the city of Toronto. That's the city I was born in. And there's a place called Casa Loma. Anyone been to Casa Loma? Any hands? Yeah, a couple people? Oh yeah, that's cool. A lot of people come out to Toronto. So basically in Toronto, there's this, like literally a castle in the middle of the city. It's quite pretty, it's quite cool. Check it out if you get a chance. I don't work there, so I don't get a commission or anything. But just thanks for that. That was like, poor people like that joke. That was a tough crowd. It's all good though. So anyways, I go to this place. It's a pretty place, public space. A lot of people hang out there. And my friend that I'm meeting up for dinner, she lives in the nearby houses in one of the basements that has been rented out. So I park in the public parking space and I'm hanging out at the fence. And there's, buses of people, tourists hanging out, locals hanging out. So I call up my friend and say, I'm here, and whenever you're ready, let me know. I'm here waiting. We're gonna go out to dinner. She's like, okay, good. We chat a bit, and then I see 2 police officers going up the hill. I'm on the phone still. If you've ever been there, the hill is quite steep. So, in fairness, yes, I was staring. I did stare at the police officers, yes. I was curious if they're gonna make it up the hill. That was one reason why I was staring. I was curious. I don't know if it was quite steep, and I don't know if they looked as if they were going to do it. They were struggling a bit. So I'm like, are they going to make it? I'm not sure. Second thing is, I was a lawyer. I've been involved in protests and demonstrations, so I had this notion that lawyers are supposed to make sure that everything is okay. We're supposed to be observing to make sure that justice is being done in an appropriate way. So I wanted to have some scrutiny on the police. So yeah, I was in fairness looking at the police, yes, quite intently. So they're biking, up the hill. They made it up the hill, so kudos to them. And they're making it up the hill, and they're turning the corner. I'm staring at them, and they're turning, and I'm still staring, and then they're out of sight. And I'm chatting with my friend at the same time. And so, chatting some more. And then, I don't know when it happened, but a couple seconds later, it seemed like, all of a sudden I looked up, and those same police officers had whipped it back around, and were right in front of me. Both of them were kind of on both sides of me. I was going, oh, that's interesting. So I'm talking to my friend and I switch into Punjabi. I speak another language, Punjabi. My friend speaks Punjabi as well. So I said, hey, there's some police officers surrounding me. And she's like, go talk to them then. Find out what's going on. I'm like, no. They haven't said I'm under arrest yet. So let's just play this out of it. See what happens, right? I'm supposed to know my rights. I'm about to become a lawyer. Let's just play this out. She's like, I don't know why you're doing this. Just say hi to them, talk to them, figure it out. Just don't get arrested. We got to go out to dinner. I'm like, don't worry. I don't know why she's thinking I'm not going to get arrested. It's fine. So we chat a bit more, and she's finally like, listen, I got nothing more to say to you. I want to get ready and go to dinner. Deal with your situation and let me know what's done. I'm like, all right, cool. So we hang up the phone. The first thing the police officers say to me is, sir, what seems to be the problem? And I'm like, I don't really have a problem. I'm like, sir, there's no problem. Well, you were staring at us like you had a problem. And I was like, oh, I was. It's true. It's true. They weren't lying. I was staring at them. So I'm like, all right. Okay. They're like, sir, we need to know what you're doing here, where you're going, and we need to see your ID right now. And I'm like, all right, wait a second. Let me just put my lawyer turban on. I'm not under arrest, so I don't have to identify myself. The charter says that I'm free from arbitrary detention and from unreasonable search and seizure. So I don't want to be detained right now. They can give me a reason. It seems arbitrary. They want to ask me some information. I don't have to answer these questions. Kids add a good soundtrack to the background. It's good. Makes it more like family. So then I say to them, sir, I don't want to answer your questions. They're like, what? Sir, we need to see your ID right now. Tell us what you're doing here, where have you come from, and where you're going right now. And really, they got aggressive. I'm not really doing a good job because I can't get that angry. I can against injustice, but I couldn't replicate how they're doing it. To me, it's not a bad thing that I'm not identifying myself, so I can't get as angry. But they were really aggressive, really angry. They took a step forward, kind of surrounded me, and got really intense. And I'm like, whoa, what's going on here? I'm like, all right, this is my chance. I know my rights. Let me just try this out. Let's see what happens. So I took a deep breath. I'm like, all right, Jagmeet, let's do this. Let's get pumped up. So I stand up, take a deep breath, and I say, sir, I will not answer your questions. I will not be providing you with any identification. This conversation is over. Goodbye. I didn't walk into a door. I kept on walking. But you get it, right? So I walked. So I'm walking, and then in my head I'm thinking, oh man, why did I do that? Oh, that was a bad idea. oh, I'm gonna get tackled any second now. I'm thinking my face is gonna go into the concrete. I'm thinking about how to fall. I'm like worried about myself. And like I can laugh about it now, but then at the same time, right after I started worrying about all this, I'm like, why am I so scared? What have I actually done? I just said I didn't want to answer some questions and I walked away. I'm literally fearful of being hurt, physically hurt. I'm literally thinking about scenarios of I'm gonna get injured by this. And I'm like, well, this is intense. So I walk, and anyways, I get in my car, shift into gear, and start driving away. They put their bicycles in front of my car. I'm like, oh, what's going on now? They knock on my window, roll down my window. I'm like, all right, what's gonna happen, right? I'm kind of curious. Like, sir, you seem to know a lot about your rights. Right? Well, you'll know according to the Highway Traffic Act, now that you're operating a motor vehicle, you must provide identification. So in fairness, I didn't do that well in my first year of criminal law course. I went on to become a defense lawyer and I was really good, but I didn't do that well in my first year course, in fairness. So I must have missed that chapter and I was like, oh man, I messed this whole thing up. I was pretty good up to that point. It was pretty like a good story, right? Like I walked away from the police, knew my rights, I didn't show my ID, but now I gotta show it. So I'm like, all right, so I show them my ID and my registration and my insurance, and they go take it and process it, radio, do whatever they do. And here's where the story gets quite interesting. So a car pulls up, a backup police cruiser pulls up. And out of the car steps out a police officer who walks up. I didn't see this happen, this particular part, but at some point they must have given him his ID, because he had my ID when he came up to the window. He was a turban bearded police officer, so a fellow Sikh like me. He came up to the window and said, sir, just want you to know, this was routine procedure. It wasn't racial profiling.
Really?
Wow. Yeah, really.
Oh no.
And I'm like, come on, man. Like, you can't, you know, some stories are so good, you just can't make them up. Like, they're just so good. Like, if I had any doubt in my mind that this was racial profiling, if I had any sort of like minor little doubt that maybe this was routine procedure, you completely cleared up those doubts and made sure that I knew this was absolutely racial profiling motivated, for you to actually come here and say that to me. But what I want to share with you is that in that moment when I was telling you I was walking away, I was frightened, I was fearful, I thought I was going to get hurt. But keep in mind, I was about to become a lawyer. I had knowledge of my rights. I had friends who were lawyers. I had resources. Imagine how much more scary that situation would have been if I was younger. Yeah, if I didn't have knowledge of the law, if I didn't have resources, if I didn't have access to friends who were in the field of law, how much more intimidating that experience would be. So when people talk about carding and police checks and say, what's the big deal? You know, you're just getting stopped. I can tell you from personal experience, in that moment, all the years of going to university and getting a degree, almost becoming a lawyer, entering into my new phase of my professional career, all that was wiped away. And in that one moment, I was a kid again, driving my dad's car, made to feel like I was not worthy in my society, that I didn't belong, that I had no worth and no value. And that's a very powerfully negative message to send to somebody. And that's what happens when people are stopped in their own community for no reason. So carding is basically what happens when a police officer stops somebody with no evidence. There's no objective criteria for the stop. There's no specific evidence linking that individual to any sort of concern. The person is being stopped simply because of the color of their skin. And there's great evidence in Toronto. They uncovered that the rate of being stopped based on the color of your skin can sometimes be as much as 5 to 10 times more likely for someone if they're racialized. Indigenous people, racialized people, particularly young black people, are stopped most often. So it needs to be stopped for that reason. The other thing though about it, and this is what's come up, is when you apply, so if you've been carded, what happens is that data is then tracked by the police. It's kept into a database. What happens, in the Toronto Star in Toronto uncovered this, people were applying for jobs. And you apply for a job, you gotta get a criminal check sometimes. Now the criminal check will come out clear because the person has no convictions, no outstanding charges, so the actual criminal records portion is clear. But there's a flag that says police contact. And in the police contact, people who are stopped are often stopped multiple times. So it'll say multiple police contact. Now, if you're an employer and you read that and you see multiple police contact, even if you're the most open-minded person, you're going to think, I don't know if I want to hire this guy. I'm going to hire the other person. So there's evidence that people were precluded from job opportunities, from volunteer opportunities, from getting into their higher post-secondary education institutions based on criminal checks. They were coming up for police contact that was happening simply because of the color of their skin. Innocent people were being precluded from opportunities. So, kind of the silver lining to the story, a lot of amazing activists. I got to shout out Desmond Cole. I got to shout out Black Lives Matter. Shout out the African Canadian Legal Clinic, the Law Union, all these amazing activists, because it's not me by myself. Again, you can never take credit for things on your own. You always build on the work of others, and there's so many people that
And
have
Al
got us.
Jones.
Yes, Al Jones. Yes, and sorry, I'm making it a bit Ontario-centric. There's folks across the country that are fighting for it. Right now in Alberta, I met a young man who pushed the government to actually start consultations in Alberta on carding, which is incredible. So the positive side of it is no one is willing to take the issue on because it's not a popular issue. Taking on police discrimination is not the best electoral issue. It doesn't get you reelected. So people didn't want to take it on. I said, listen, I've not backed down from a fight. I know what injustice is like. This is an important issue of justice. We need to stand up. So I brought the issue up in the Parliament in Ontario. We raised the issue and said that we need a provincial strategy on it. The government started a consultation process. We go, that's not far enough. So I put forward a motion calling for an end to carding in the province of Ontario, and that motion passed unanimously, and the government then passed regulations working towards ending the practice of carding in Ontario, which was a big step forward. So that's my story. So that's why I care. Those are some of the reasons why I care. Those are some of the stories about giving you a sense of what the issues that matter to me and this fight that I'll bring to any issue, the passion that I'll bring to any issue. So I wanted to give you a bit of a background about what I care about and why I care. It's love and courage, right? So when we launch a love and courage, people are like, what? What are you talking about love and courage in politics? What the heck's that all about? Like, no, that's what it's all about. That's what it's all about. Because I'll tell you what. It takes an act of love to realize that we're all connected, to see that we're all fellows in this struggle together, that we're all, each and one of us, on this boat together, and we want to build a more just society together. And if someone else is struggling, that's me struggling, right? That's where we're struggling if we're not doing well together. And if we rise together. So it takes an act of love to realize that. It takes love to connect to one another. But it takes courage to do something about it. It takes courage to demand better, to dream bigger, to fight for more justice in our lives. And that's why I think it is all about love and courage. That's why I believe in that so much. So if you're with me on some love and courage, let me hear some love and courage. That's awesome. Okay, now that was beautiful. I was going to do something on Snapchat. You did it for me. That was beautiful. And a lot of love. That was so good. I'm so heartwarmed. Thank you.